I have 3 stories today, timestamps in the description box. Story number 1. Opie writes, Husband, 37 male, moved in his siblings without letting me, 32 female, know. All our future plans have basically been thrown away and I'm heartbroken. Husband and I have been married for 5 years. For some context, his siblings, twins, early 20s, are underdeveloped physically and mentally. They can take care of themselves as far as wiping themselves, going to the bathroom and feeding themselves, but they are rather weak, having brittle and fragile bones, and combined with their mental maturity, which is similar to that of about a 12 to 13-year-old, they have to be monitored, cooked for, assisted with going upstairs, moving around for long distances, etc. They can't take care of themselves financially because of all this. All of this I knew while we were dating, but they were being cared for by a team of nurses and caregivers at the time, not in our home. But about a few months ago, the team was all fired. My husband told me that he was planning to move them in, and about a week or so later, they were moved in, along with a new team. I had no say or even much of a heads up about any of it. The house suddenly became full of staff. Someone was always there. Our privacy was basically snatched away. My husband already has a busy schedule. He's a doctor on call a lot. And now I feel like we barely have time to ourselves. I'm competing with everything and everyone. We were about to start a family now that we were all settled. Things were good between us, but now everything has been thrown into chaos, and I don't know how to feel. I feel almost a sense of grief. I feel like I have no control of anything. I feel like he just threw away our future and plans, as cruel as that may sound. We had a talk and everything was pointing toward a divorce, but I just feel so bitter. I feel like he's just giving up. He feels like I'm not being thoughtful enough. I love him more than anything and want to salvage our marriage if I can, before just making any snap decisions. Any advice is appreciated. Edit. Also, I should say, his parents are estranged. I've never met them, not even before we married. He cut them off a while ago for a very understandable reason. And here's Opie's update. After taking everyone's thoughts into consideration and taking some time to myself to think, I sat down with my husband when he was off call and told him I wanted to talk about everything that's happened. He told me that he wanted to talk too, and we had a raw heart-to-heart about everything. We discussed the main issue that I mentioned in my previous post. I told him that I felt hurt about him not consulting or even telling me about what was going on, and he sincerely apologized for it, telling me that he wasn't thinking about much else other than their situation, which I understand, even if it still made me feel a certain way. But then he told me that he needed to be honest to me about something, and that he understood that it may affect things between us, but that the whole situation with his siblings and their previous care team made him realize it even more. He became very blunt. He told me that while he loves me more than anything, he loves them more, and that he has to put them first from now on, above anything. He told me that he couldn't handle anything else happening, and that everything is done, the cameras, moving in the staff, was necessary. And while of course this hurt for me to hear, even though I understand, like I have for this whole situation, I realized some things. He might have acted selfishly at first, even if it was understandable, but my reaction could have been better, I admit. He was breaking down right in front of me, reliving trauma that reminded him of his childhood, and I was too busy in my own feelings to offer any true support. I felt awful about that. I didn't mention much of it in my previous post, but his parents were truly awful people. Their neglect caused the underdeveloped/regressed state of the twins in the first place. And if he hadn't taken care of them while they were small, they probably wouldn't have survived. They're very attached to him, almost like a small child with their parent. As painful as it was, I accepted that I couldn't come before their relationship. I did know about his legal obligation before we became married, so I obviously knew they were important to him. I have no bitter feelings towards the two. They're innocent in this situation and are very precious in their ways in general. As far as our future plans, we agreed that we'd wait a few years, 3 at the max, before truly deciding if we wanted to have a child or not. We were on the fence, but I was falling in love with the idea of motherhood, perhaps more than I realized. He was also very receptive about having designated areas that were staff only and me only. It's already been implemented a bit, with still more things to put in place, and I'm feeling a lot better about that already. And lastly, I realized that this may seem like the fool's option to some, to the many who jumped straight to divorce. But now I know all the facts and where he stands. So anything that may happen from now will be completely on me. I feel hopeful in my decision, and I'm not wanting to give up. For him and the marriage that I still value so much, I'm willing to give it a try and try to adjust to our new normal. Thank you to everyone who helped me. Final edit. Thank you everyone. I'm logging out from this account now. I appreciate some of the advice more than others, but everyone's opinions were still read. Overall, I am content with my decision and I'm looking forward to seeing what the future might bring for us, whether we have children or not. With the resources that we have, I am sure we will work things out. We both know where the other stands and what we've gotten into. That conversation we will revisit when we make our decision. We love each other, whether some choose to believe it or not. Thanks again. Let's get a couple of comments with replies from Opie. Can you buy a larger home or renovate with a separate wing that's not so invasive? Opie replies, so I'm really not trying to get into too much detail or seem like I'm bragging or anything. I mentioned this in our previous post, but our house is pretty big. He owns land and we live in a near mansion. Right now I have my own little apartment. No one is allowed there but me and him. Staff are only allowed in designated rooms. I feel a lot better about these boundaries. And someone else writes, I second checking genetics. My ex has mental illness/developmental disorders on his side of the family and even has some himself, and our child is severe. As in, when we die, he will probably be locked away in a facility because he cannot care for himself at all. I'd have never done this to my child or myself had I known what I was in for. Opie replies, so I was trying to avoid saying this, but the thing with the twins really comes down to extreme abuse. They were severely starved as young children and abused pretty badly emotionally, and as such, they didn't develop normally. Their bodies and bones didn't receive the nutrients they needed, and because of this, they didn't grow normally. Even after treatment, there was irreversible damage done. They are emotionally/mentally stuck as children due to the trauma, but I still might bring up genetic testing if we decide to go down that route. Well, Opie, a lot of people in the comments were very concerned about the fact that your husband moved the twins in without even discussing it with you. I mean, that really is the big issue here. It's not that he's taking care of them. And thank goodness you live in a house that's big enough for him to be able to do that and to afford his staff. So that is not the issue. I mean, things like this should be discussed with your significant other before you proceed. You went through a lot of stress because of this that could have been avoided if your husband had just sat you down before and talked to you, and if you had worked out together what your expectations are, what your concerns are before the twins moved in. And this is a very, very big thing that he's done, so it's not really something that you can do without discussing it with your spouse. A lot of people that left comments are convinced that you are going to end up getting divorced at some point. But I'm going to hope for the best, Opie, and that things are going to work out and that you will adjust to your new normal. I do understand that this is a very difficult situation for your husband as well. And it was truly sad to read your description of the twins and the physical state they're in, let alone the mental state. So really, I do hope this works out for everyone. But just be careful, Opie, that you don't end up dead last every time. Your husband is going to have to find the balance as well. Well, let's move on to story number 2. Opie writes, I met this girl 2 years ago as my lab partner for one of my classes. We became friends, eating dinner together after class and studying together. We've continued to take the same classes, but I don't see her as often one-on-one because we joined an informal study group with other people from our class. Recently, she's been more open than usual, getting closer to me when we're working on a problem together and being more chatty/flirty. She and I are both single and have been for a while. I thought that she was interested in me, and I decided to take a shot in the dark. I pulled her aside after a study session last week, and once everyone else had left, I brought up how we're both single and asked if she wanted to be friends with benefits. She asked what I meant, and I said that we could hook up sometimes, and otherwise keep things the same and still be friends. She said that she really isn't interested in that, and that she doesn't see me that way. I said, quote, "Oh, okay, see you tomorrow then," unquote, and left. I'm hurt that I got rejected, but at the time I was still glad that I had been brave enough to go through with it. I knew it was going to be awkward with her for a few days, but it's been a lot worse than that. At the study sessions, she sits at the other side of the table from where she used to. She only works with other people in the group and doesn't even glance at me, except if I directly ask her a question. Yesterday, I tried to walk alongside her as she left the study session and said, quote, "Hey, I haven't seen you in a while. How's it going?" unquote. She said that she didn't want to talk and that she feels weird about me. I left her alone after that, but I'm crushed. I understand why she's mad at me, and I know it's all my fault. I was incredibly stupid, and I don't know if I can undo what I did. I thought if she said no, she would just tease me a little and leave it at that, but I understand that what I said really hurt her. Is there any way I can get her to be friends with me again? Should I apologize? And if so, how should I word it? I really don't want to lose her as a friend. And here's Soapy's update. So I took the advice in the original post and didn't say anything further to her. Last night, she sent me a text telling me she doesn't think she can be friends with me anymore. She said that what I did made her feel uncomfortable and that she's not attracted to me and doesn't know what made me ask her that. She told me to leave her alone and to not talk to her at the study sessions. I didn't reply to that, and I'm not going to today's study session. I feel ashamed and embarrassed at what I did, but I'm also very hurt that this happened. I'm upset that she's throwing away our friendship over this, even though I know I shouldn't have asked her that. I also think she's been telling other people what happened. In my first class this morning, this random girl who sits near me said, quote, "Did you really ask," friend's name, "to hook up with you?" unquote. I asked where she heard that, and she just told me to stay away from friend's name. I'm afraid of how many other people she might have told, which is partly why I don't want to go to study session today, in case she's told them. I also got a text later from an unrecognized number saying, quote, "You're a creep," unquote. I blocked that number, but I'm feeling very uneasy. This situation has been stressful for both of us, so I don't know why she's making it worse by telling people about it. We've both suffered enough already, and would be better off if we just moved on. I'm still devastated at losing her as a friend, and at being rejected, so I just want to lick my wounds and slowly get over it. To be clear, I accept that I've lost her as a friend and that this was my fault for being so stupid, but I feel that she's gone too far by airing our dirty laundry when this should really be kept as a private matter between us. I'm also worried that I won't have a chance with other girls at our college if they hear about this. Is there anything I should do about this story spreading? And if so, what do I do? Should I say anything to her? There's a lot of things happening at once and I'm confused as to what I should do. OP, awkward. Look, the best thing to do is to do what she asked you, and that is to leave her alone. She doesn't want to be friends. She doesn't want to talk to you. Respect that, because if you don't, you are really going to look like a creep. As for people talking about this, look, OP, it's possible that she told only one person, maybe two. And the thing is, this kind of thing will spread and other people hear about it and they will talk about it until they find something else to talk about. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. This thing will blow over pretty fast, OP, I'm sure of it. Well, let's move on to our final story. Story number 3. OP writes, My wife, 30 female, and I, 35 male, bought our house 5 years ago, and it needs work, but time and money are always a constraint. Right now, my wife is not working while she goes back to school, and I'm working second shift as the sole earner. Since my wife is home more than me, she has been handling most of the work that's been done around the house, including dealing with contractors. She comes from a family of DIYers who tend to shoot from the hip with projects, while I prefer to have a plan in place before we do any work. And the most recent projects that she spearheaded have been, in my opinion, subpar. For example, our privacy fence gate doesn't close right, and she hasn't gotten the contractor to come to fix it for months. The internet line wasn't buried deep enough by the contractors, and I think she should have sent them away when they didn't have the right equipment. She decided, without my input, to use a cleanser on our house before restaining it, and the cleanser left streaks in the wood that cannot be covered by the stain. We have a wooden sculpture in our yard that she did not clean, and it is dark and dirty and looks like crap. She doesn't see anything wrong with it. Most recently, we had gutter work done, and I wanted a gutter put on the back of our new shed. She forgot to tell the contractor where I wanted the downspout, and he put it in the opposite corner. So now the water is just going to collect behind the shed, which is exactly what I wanted to avoid. She called me at work to give me this news, and I spent the rest of the day frustrated. When I got home, I asked what we are going to do about this, and she said something about fixing it ourselves. I told her that it would never be right if we fixed it ourselves, that I already paid for the work to be done right the first time, and we're just pissing away money and time with needing to redo all these projects that she's been half-assing. I asked if she even cared about the quality of work that is being done on the house, and said that maybe she shouldn't be involved with any more projects on the house unless communication improves. She just sat in silence and slept on the couch without speaking to me. This morning, I asked if she was going to talk to me, and she said, quote, "I don't know," unquote. I was exasperated and asked if she could just tell me what is wrong, and she replied, quote, "I'm scared of you," unquote. She told me she wished I had approached the issue by looking for a solution, and I told her that she just doesn't want to be accountable for her actions. She said she just wants us, quote, "to be partners," unquote. I could be the a-hole for how I went about telling her about my feelings, but I feel like there's no way for me to give her negative feedback without her freaking out. Am I the a-hole for telling my wife that she needs to be accountable for her actions? Well, Opie was judged the a-hole by the community, and 5 months later we have this update. I posted about 5 months ago about an argument my wife and I had, and I was determined to be the a-hole. Recently, someone commented on that post asking if my wife has left me yet, so I decided to update. A lot of people recognized that the way I spoke with my wife was full of frustration and anger, which was unproductive, but even more than that, it was scary to my wife. Someone had an excellent comment pointing out that I was just blowing off steam and that my priority should be my partnership. We covered a lot of topics in the weeks following that incident. We had a couples therapy session to talk about strategies and communication. I saw one of my co-workers react in anger and frustration instead of taking the time to become calm, and realized from the outside looking in just how unproductive this behavior was. And then my wife showed me a section of one of our self-help books. It's called The 5 Personality Patterns, and my therapist had recommended it to me a while back. We had been reading it together, my wife and I, but then we got busy and we stopped. She picked it back up after our fight and read about the leaving pattern. She underlined a bunch of sections and read them to me, and I finally understood. I grew up in a house where my parents screamed and yelled at each other or picked fights in order to storm out of the house. So that's how I used to interpret my wife's silence, as a way to win the fight. In reality, when she became silent, she was terrified. She wasn't stonewalling me, or trying to win the fight by manipulating me, or trying to avoid taking responsibility. She was so scared in that moment that she wasn't even in her body. She couldn't even speak. She was totally dissociated. She told me that even though she knows that how I was acting wasn't objectively scary, that her threshold for shutting down is really low. Realizing how much I scared my wife broke my heart. The descriptions of disassociation in the book were terrifying to me. My wife is the sweetest person. I love her so much, and I never wanted to experience what she experienced that day ever again. It changed my perspective completely. Ever since my realization, our relationship is better than ever. We laugh and tease each other playfully. We have worked on projects together. We've talked about chores and money. We've even had a couple of fights and resolved them quickly and lovingly. Our communication is better because we trust each other. My wife told me that she has never felt safer or more loved now. I won't say I'm glad the fight happened, but what I realized because of it has been a turning point in our marriage for the better. OP, well done. You can be proud of yourself. In a relationship, there will be conflict, there will be arguments from time to time. Knowing how to successfully resolve those is what ultimately determines how happy your relationship will be, if it will even last, if it will go the distance. Doing the work to understand yourself and your partner ultimately makes this journey together so much easier and fun. Even as you say, you and your wife, you're having fun. You're joking with each other. You're teasing each other. And when you've had fights, you've resolved them quickly because now you know how. So keep it up, OP. You were the a-hole initially, but now you're the hero. And that's it for now. Thank you for joining me, for listening to these stories. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, leave me a comment, and I'm going to see you again very soon. Bye, everyone.